It's in the Bible. Thanks, everybody. Ecclesiastes chapter 1. Last week, Brother Mario spoke personally about his life and how he's got ups and downs in it. He talked about how sometimes we get stuck in that down spot, kind of in that depressed spot, that unhappy spot. But every time he comes around to that, God is there to help bring him up. God is there to help lift him up and take him out of that situation, and that God has always been there for him and never allowed him to stay in that state and to suffer. And he just gave a very powerful testimony about how God has worked in his life over the years, to deliver him and bring him to where he is today. And as he was thinking about that, and there are many times where we can get down, we can get kind of stuck in the rut, we can get to where things are kind of weighing on us a lot. And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about here Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, chapter 2. As the writer here of Ecclesiastes, speaks and talks, he brings up a lot of questions and a lot of challenges and a lot of doubts and uncertainty that he himself experiences. And it just makes me think about what Brother Mario was talking about last week. As he opens it up, he talks about in verse 3, what profit has a man of all his labor which he taketh under the sun? What's the point of all this work? He says in verse 4, one generation passes away, another generation comes. It's been going like this for years. The earth abides forever. We just think about, one generation comes up, they live, another generation is born, the old generation dies, and it just keeps going. He's like, what's the point? Verse 5, the sun rises, the sun goes down. Verse 6, the wind goes toward the south, and then it turns around and it goes to the north. But it just continually changes. Has these same circuits that it runs over and over and over again. Verse 7, the rivers run into the sea. Does the sea get full? No. It just keeps going, just keeps going. It says things just keep on going. Verse 8, all things are full of labor. Man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing. The ears filled with that is not going to be filled with hearing. The eyes never get tired of seeing things. Your ears get tired of it. You're always wanting to consume. You can't fulfill. Verse 9, the thing that has been, it's going to come again, shall be. That which is done is that which shall be done. There is no new thing under the sun. So I feel like he's saying, I kind of am stuck in this rut. Generation after generation comes. You work and you work and you work, and what for? The sun comes up, the sun goes down. The rivers go into the sea. The sea's not satisfied. It doesn't get full up. It just keeps consuming more. And, the wind just comes and it goes. It just continually, nothing ever changes, right? It all just keeps going. Verse 11. There is no remembrance of former things. Neither shall there be any remembrance of things that are come with those that shall to come after. There were people that were here on this earth that are now gone, and there's nobody alive that remembers them. Nobody around that recalls them. In a few generations, there's not going to be anybody that, who's Tim? Who is he? Who's Brother Gutierrez? Who is he? It goes on. He's like, I feel that he, sees this, I don't call it despair, but this emptiness. This emptiness. What is it all about? Verse 14. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. All these things happen on the earth. Men try to accomplish great things. Women try to accomplish great things. All this goes on and happens. But at the end of it all, it's just vanity. It's vexation of spirit. It really is to no avail. It really accomplishes nothing. Verse 15. That which is crooked cannot be made straight. We see things happen. We see things occur. We see crime. We see politicians do things. And you see it's wrong. You're like, why can't it be straightened out? Why can't it be fixed? The crooked cannot be made straight. That which is wanted cannot be numbered. And in verse 16, I commune with my heart, saying, Lo, I am come to great estate, and have gotten more wisdom than all that they have been before me in Jerusalem. Yea, my heart and great experience of wisdom and knowledge. Like I've accomplished a lot. I know a lot. I have a lot of wisdom. I've done great things. I gave my heart, verse 17, to know wisdom, to know madness, folly. I perceive that this is also vexation of spirit. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge, increase sorrow. So, it's like he's really communicating this state of kind of like what Brother Mario was talking about last week. When we get down and we get out, and it's like, how do I get out of the rut? He's just seeing and observing all these things. In chapter 2, he goes on and he talks about, I did a lot of different things. Verse 4, I made me great works, chapter 2. I builded houses. I planted vineyards. I did all this work. Gardens, it says in verse 5. Orchards. Trees with all kinds of fruit. Pools of water, verse 6. To water the trees that bring wood. I got manservants and maidens, verse 7. I had great possessions. He had great wealth. He had built up all these things. Verse 8, silver, gold. Kill your treasure of kings. He had singers. He had all of this luxury, all these assets, all this wealth. Verse 9, so I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. Many times we look at superstars or heroes, actors, actresses, sports figures, people that have all this money, and we look at them and go, wow, they must have it all. They must be happy. And it's like, the reality is, many of them are not. Because that's not going to get you this happiness. It's not the key to happiness. And that's what he's saying here. I had all this stuff. I had all this treasure. I had all these servants. I had all these people that were doing things for me. I was so great. I had wisdom, knowledge, understanding. I had it all. What's it all worth? Nothing. Verse 11 again, he goes to that. Behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. So I can feel, and he goes on throughout this book of Ecclesiastes, kind of pouring out his heart and his mind, trying to figure it all out. What's the point of this life? What am I here for? I've accomplished great things, but I'm empty. I've had great wealth and great assets, but I feel like I have nothing. I've had people work for me, and I've had great wealth, and I understand things, I have great knowledge and wisdom, but where am I? And you can see he's kind of searching within his own soul, within his own self, looking for what is the key to happiness here? What is the key to success here? So he goes on throughout the rest of the chapters of Ecclesiastes, talking about these things. And as I think about his conundrum and the position that he found himself in, and as Brother Mario was talking about it last week, the situation that we find ourselves in many times, sometimes I think it has to do with how we define what happiness is, how we define what success is, how we define what being fulfilled and satisfied is. By his definition, he had all these things. But he didn't feel fulfilled. He didn't feel satisfied. He didn't feel happy. And we can get in the same situation. How do we define what happiness is? There's a lot of ways that we try to get this happiness, that we try to get this satisfaction, that we try to find this key to what makes one fulfilled. And again, I think it comes down to defining what that means. Sometimes we try to define it by the clothes that we wear. So-and-so wears this type of clothing or that type of clothing. And when I'm able to get those kind of clothes, that'll be happiness. That'll be success. Or the house that we live in, the house that we have, or the neighborhood that we live in. We define that as being, when I get there, I'll have happiness. When I get there, I'll have success. I'll have achieved it then. Or the car that we drive. Or the friends that we have. Or the job that we have. Sometimes we start, what is happiness to you? What is happiness? How do you define that? When I'm going to do this job for a while, and then one of these days I'm going to have that job over there. And then, you know what? I'll be happy. What's the matter, Andrew?
Those words sound familiar.
They sound familiar, right? It's like, where does the satisfaction, where does the fulfillment come from? We define it in our mind. This is what it looks like. This is what it is. And that's what the preacher in Ecclesiastes is doing. He's saying, I thought it was all these things. But it was all vexation of spirit. It was all vanity. How we think about ourselves, how we define, who we are and the image about ourselves, how we should talk. We start to kind of define this is what happiness is. And then when we fulfill that and we get there, we find it's empty. And we're still looking. We're still searching. What's normal is constantly being defined for us. It's constantly we're being told, this is normal, that's abnormal. This is what you were expected to do, and this isn't. Right? Chris calls it, I think, being programmed. We're constantly being programmed of what the expectations are. And we're constantly being programmed, this is happiness. This is how you get it. This is how you achieve it. This is normal. This is good. I don't know if you guys ever heard the guy Dave Ramsey, who he is. All right, he's like, normal is being broke and stupid. But that's what everybody wants to be, normal. He's like, why do you want to be normal? Normal is being broke and stupid. But we have these, the normal is being defined for us. This is what it looks like. And then when we get it and we have it, it's like, I don't have anything. And that's exactly what he's saying here. Our personal expectations of what happiness is, what being fulfilled is, really defines whether or not we're going to achieve it or not. So he goes through Ecclesiastes, he's talking about all these things that he sees occurring himself personally and how the earth works and the world works, and he's just like, what is it all about? In Ecclesiastes 12, verse 13. Ecclesiastes 12:13. These words are so profound. These words are so deep, but yet simple to say. It's very powerful what he has to say here. Because he's just gone through, and we only went through chapter 1 and chapter 2 of what he was saying, and him pouring out his heart. We're in chapter 12 now, so he's gone on and he's talked about these things that he's struggled with, and what doesn't make sense to him, and what he's seeking for, looking for in life. And he comes around in the conclusion here in Revelation 12, verse 13. He says, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. All that stuff that I just talked about in chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, all the way through, he said, let us hear the conclusion of the whole thing. This is what it's all about, he says. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. Let me break it down for you, he says. You can go through life wondering about all this stuff, struggling with all this stuff. Let me define to you what the key to happiness and success and fulfillment is. It's to do what? Fear God respect God, fear God, keep His commandments. This is the whole duty of man. You know, rarely is God actually mentioned, especially in today's society as we're moving away from God rather than towards God. Rarely is it really broken down this simple for us. You know, you want to be happy, you want to be fulfilled, you want to find the true happiness, source of happiness. It's with God. It's fear God, keep His commandments. That's where it is. Rarely do we hear it mentioned. I mean, we'll go to seminars. Motivational seminars, and you know, listen to how to build ourselves up and get motivated, or buy CDs or DVDs to learn a new technique for this or for that, and how to be successful. And you know what, we'll go to psychiatrists and counselors. We'll get medications. We'll do all these things, searching and looking, because we're trying to. We've got that definition of success and happiness in our mind that may be blurred, it may be foggy. It's like, what is it? And so when we never find it, we constantly search, we constantly look. And here in Ecclesiastes, like, let me break it down for you. Let me break it down for you here. The conclusion of the whole matter is, fear God and keep His commandments. If you're fearing God and keeping His commandments, you are doing what God wants.
In today's world, also that to me would be the word competition. You know, in this world, and you know, you're being pushed to be better. And you get to the age, like he says, you know, it's all vanity. But people to push you in the competition. There's competition in the church. I'm saying. Also to compete because this person got assigned to go and we'll say he or she is the person that is going to work with the whole church in this capacity, but the other person wants that position. And you're going, wait a minute. Right. This is the church, it's okay. Just to be yourself, right. To be who you are. Right. You don't have to go on there. Because just stay with God, like you said, right? So I just thought I brought up that word competition.
Yeah. Because the source behind the competition, if you think about it, the source behind the competition is this desire to fulfill some sort of accomplishment above and beyond where you are. And it's like, you know, this competition can be healthy, but this constant thing of always more, always new. You know, you have a house, but you want a bigger house. You have a car, but you want a more expensive car. You have a position, but you want a more expensive position. Whatever that may be, you know, that's what's being put into our minds as normal. And the preacher says, let me break it down for you. Here is what success is. Fear God, keep His commandments. All the other stuff is noise. Romans chapter 8. And the interesting thing Sister Rue brought up is that, you know, as he gets up in age and recognizes this, you know, this wisdom that we can get from God can be at any age. That's the great thing about the Spirit of God, is God can give us the wisdom to recognize and see and understand these things at any age. Romans 8, 6 and 7. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. To be spiritually minded is life and peace. You know, spiritually minded, you know, we're allowing the Spirit of God to dictate. We're allowing the Spirit of God to be our motivation. We're allowing the Spirit of God to speak to us. It says when we have a spiritual mind, it's life and it's peace. It's peace. When we know, according to what the preacher said there in Ecclesiastes, you know, we're fearing God and we're keeping His commandments, life and peace. Spiritually minded gives us that life and peace. Because the carnal mind, it says in verse 7, is enmity against God. For it is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be. So, seeking satisfaction, seeking fulfillment, seeking the key to happiness, and all this other stuff, it's gonna result in you wanting more, looking for more. I've told you the story before about the guy I used to work with who was an NFL football star. Had money, had cars, had oil wells. And at the time that I knew him, he was in his 40s and living at home with his mom again because he had lost it all. And he was like, I had it, but it wasn't enough. I wanted more excitement. I wanted more of this. It was the competition. I wanted more money. I wanted more fame. And it ruined me. And that's when we're carnally minded. That's what happens. It can't be satisfied. Just like he said in the beginning part of Ecclesiastes, we see and it's never enough. We hear, it's never enough. The ocean, water keeps going into it from all the rivers, but it never is satisfied. It never gets full. It just can't be filled up. Carnally minded is death, but spiritually minded is life and peace. The carnal mind and the spiritual mind are constantly at odds with each other. We learn that happiness and that peace with ourselves, we're taught that that's many different ways, many different ways that these things occur. Even within Christianity itself. Getting back to Ecclesiastes 12:13. Even within Christianity itself, sometimes the definition of happiness within Christianity isn't defined by what his standard was. Fear God and keep his commandments. Sometimes the definition is changed and it's modified. And, in the name of grace, in the name of freedom, in the name of liberty, we make many excuses and justify not doing what the preacher said. Fear God and keep his commandments. Many times in talking with people or many times in seeing all the self-help stuff that's out there, it talks about, the prescription is you need to take charge of your life. You need to be in charge of your destiny. You need to take control. You need to steer this ship. You need to go this, you need to define your own destiny. Is that what the preacher was saying in Ecclesiastes? So I'll tell you what the key to success is. Fear God and keep his commandments. And when we start to define that is success, what does it matter about what clothes we wear? If success is fearing God and keep his commandments, does it matter what clothes I wear? Does it matter what car I drive? What house I live in? Who my friends are? What job I have? If we define success like the preacher did, fearing God and keep his commandments, all that stuff goes away, right? It disappears because it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter anymore about those things. And Paul said this in a different way. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Second Corinthians chapter 12. He kind of says it in a different way, the opposite way of what I was just telling Cindy there. If you want to be happy, if you want to be successful, then take control of your own destiny and become the captain of your own ship. Paul kind of says it the opposite way. 2 Corinthians 12, 7 through 10. It says, and lest I should be exalted above measure, through the abundance of the revelations there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice, that it might depart from me. And he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. My strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So Paul said exactly the opposite of what I was telling Cindy. Take control of your own destiny, go make your own way, go do your own things. Is that what Paul said? He said, actually, I'm strongest when I'm the weakest, because then Christ in me is the strongest. Because Christ is preeminent, Christ is first, and I'm second. What do the preachers say? Let's sum this whole thing up. Let's be the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God, keep His commandments. We allow that to be the preeminent driver. We allow that to be the definition of success. We can be content and happy in whatever clothes we have, whatever stuff that we have, or whatever we don't have. Because we're doing and fulfilling not what society dictates is what normal is, not what the world says this is the standard, not what the world says this is what you should look like and this is how you should dress, but what God says. That's what we need to be judging ourselves against. Romans 12:2. When we define success according to God's standards and know what that is, we can get that peace. We can have that spiritual mind, be at peace with it. Romans 12:2 says, be not conformed to this world. Be not conformed to this world. But, what? Be ye transformed. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Mrs. Ruby had an interesting insight there with the competition thing. You know, many times people come to me, works at, when are you going to be vice president? I don't know. Number one. Number two, I don't care. I mean, call me what you want to call me. Doesn't matter. But that competition thing is always being stirred up, right? That carnal thing is always being stirred up. You know, when are you going to be this? When are you going to be that? And it's so easy to become conformed to the world, right? And start measuring yourself against that standard. Andrew, when are you going to be the store manager?
Whenever I said I wanted.
Take control, brother. It says, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right? We can easily get into that. Chris, when you gonna run the electric company?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow? Excellent. Very good. You start now. Tomorrow morning when Chris wakes up, and he puts his pants on, and he goes out and he starts doing stuff, he's going to realize, I'm not in charge of the electric company. Right? He's going to realize that tomorrow. And tomorrow night, he's going to start to get a little down. Oh man, I wanted to be in charge of the electric company, and I'm not. I wanted to be the boss of the electric company, and I'm not. Man, I didn't succeed. Man, I didn't do what I wanted to do. I didn't take control of my own destiny. Take control. How we define success determines how we're going to be happy or not, right? And we go back to saying, you know, the preacher went through this struggle. He went through this exact struggle, and he articulated that throughout the entire book of Ecclesiastes. You know, all these things that he had seen and experienced, and he's like, at the end of the day, I've been there and done it all. I've had riches, I've had servants, I've had workers, I've had knowledge, I've had wisdom, I've had treasure, I've had everything. And it doesn't matter. It all comes back, fear God, and keep His commandments. So Romans 12:2, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God. The key to happiness, the key to success, the key to getting ourselves up out of that pit when we fall down into it, the key to allowing God help us get out of it, is clearly understanding, you know, this is what God expects, and this is when we're fulfilling it. And all these other things, they're minor. All these other things, they don't matter. But Satan wants He wants us to define ourselves by these things of the world, right? Be ye not conformed to the world. He wants those standards for us to conform to them. And when we don't get them, when we don't become in charge of the electric company, we become depressed, we become down. And that's what he wants. But that's what it says here in Romans. Don't be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
When Satan was asking to be head of the kingdom, wasn't that a competition? He was trying to take God's place.
Right. That's what got Satan in trouble, right? Yeah, but he could put himself in the place of God. Hey, I can do that. I can run things. Right? So don't be conformed to that mindset, but go back to, hey, what's required of me, and how do I know if I'm succeeding? How do I know if I'm fulfilling things? Am I respecting God? Am I fearing God? Am I following His word? Am I following His commandments? If so, I'm successful. If not, I've got some work to do. So I just wanted to kind of follow up on Mario's message last week. It really made me think about, why is it that many times we find ourselves in this up and down cycle, and how is it that we find ourselves sometimes, down and oppressed, if you will, or weighted down? And, a lot of times I think it has to do with, we're searching for what the definition, of success is, and we create it, or allow it to be created for us, and then we fall short, and then we get down. So let's follow the definition and the experience and the wisdom that the preacher had in Ecclesiastes. He said, don't worry about this. Conclusion of the whole matter: fear God, keep His commandments. We stick with that, and we're going to be fine. Let's stand together and sing one last song. One other announcement that I forgot a little earlier. I talked to Brother Tommy this week about the Houston church coming over.